I want to welcome you to the online question and answer video. And this is our very first question for the Online Learning Center. And it's from Kirk Welton in Palo Alto, California. Kirk writes, when descending a technically challenging road, where should your body weight be positioned? Feet, hands, legs, center of gravity, and which brake should you use primarily? When I descend a highway, I am constantly considering where to place my weight, and when I observe others struggling to descend in a safe manner, I think some education would help. Well, thanks a lot, Kurt. That is a great question. And it's actually a fun, one of my favorite things to coach when I work with athletes individually is to teach them how to descend properly. And you touched on a lot of the issues that go into controlling a bike safely on narrow, fast, and steep descents, or even at slower speeds. But first and foremost, what we want you to know is that most of us use a technique we may not even be aware of when we're riding down a steep hill and we're working through various turns. We're using a technique called counter steering. And that is, if we're turning to the right, we instinctively turn the handlebars slightly to the left. What I like to have athletes do, however, is to do it with more purpose. So what we'll have you do is on a right-hand turn, you will be pushing forward on the right hand, slightly forward and away from the inside of the turn. So you're actually steering slightly towards the opposite way of the turn, therefore counter steering. And the best way to do this, or one of the effective ways to do this, is to descend a longer hill at a reasonably slow speed or a controlled speed and work on the technique as you're doing that. Another way of doing it is to use a parking lot on a Saturday or a Sunday morning where you can do figure of eights and practice counter steering techniques as you're moving to the right and then looping back around to the left as you go through this figure of eight. And you will feel how stable the bike feels as a result of that. Weighting yourself, positioning your feet on one side or the other as you turn is equally, if not just as important. When you're turning to the right, the inside leg is up. But most of your weight, and I'm thinking 80 to 90% of your weight, should be on the pedal on the outside. As you're turning to the right, the weight on your left foot should be pressed down onto that pedal. So while you're counter steering, and the counter steering is a feathered position, it's not a real strong position, but just have enough tension of pushing that handlebar forward slightly is really what you want to do. If you push the right forearm slightly, right handlebar forward, that's just enough, all you need, and you will push it more or less depending upon your speed and depending upon the turn. The same will hold true for how much weight you place on that outside pedal. The steeper and faster, the sharper the turn, the more weight that you're going to place on that stance leg. And I think it's important to think of that outside leg as a stance leg. You will be amazed at how much more stable that you're going to feel when you're coming around that turn. So just from those two items alone, you're going to feel more stability. But the big thing is braking. Braking on a turn or into a turn is different than braking while you're in a turn. Coming into a turn at high speeds, and that would be generally when the road is straighter and before you hit this apex of the turn, is you're going to probably be braking both brakes and feathering both brakes slightly. If you need to slow yourself down considerably, be aggressive and pull the brakes fairly hard. But the key is on the turn, or when you really need to pull a quick stop or reduce your speed rather quickly, it's the front brake that's the one that needs to be pulled. The back brake should actually be left alone for the most part, especially while you're in the turn. The back brake, if you pull on that back brake, will lock up and skid, whereas as you're going downhill, the weight and the forces on pulling that front brake will actually drive the wheel into the ground, and you'll feel just very nice and stable when you're going around those turns. So again, we have counter steering, stance leg on the outside foot, on the outside leg, and braking on the front brake. We like to see more people using that technique than gripping really hard on both brakes. The rear brake is the killer brake. It's the one that's going to get you in the most trouble when you're descending. Surely when you're on the straights or going through more of chicane types of turns, you can brake both if you need to. But when there's a sharp turn to the right or left, you're going to want to make sure that you pull that front brake first and almost exclusively to slow yourself down. It will prevent skidding, it'll drive your wheel right into the ground, and then when you combine that with counter steering and that weight on that stance leg, you're going to feel a whole lot more secure on the descents. Anyway, that is a tip that will make every movement better than the last, and I want to thank Kirk Welton again from Palo Alto, California. We appreciate you watching, and we look forward to getting more of your questions on the Q&A section of the videos. I'm Coach Mark Evans. Thanks for watching.